Come back up. Thank you. I have one real quick question. I know I said I wasn't going to ask any questions today, but I do have a question. I saw a person yesterday. Actually, this probably is more of an OPA question. As I think about it, it's more of an OPA question. It's about the change in land values.
Yeah, it's OPA.
So, okay, that's it. I'm going to recognize Councilman Don.
Thank you, Council President.
Right.
I have a few minor questions, but I'd be remiss if I didn't ask them. This is just a question in general. If you have more than 20 properties and you walk into the municipal services building to pay the water bills, as an example, you're only allowed to pay 10 at a time. Is there any reason that you got to go back to the end of the line and start over again?
Honestly, I didn't know. I'd have to check if that is actually the policy, because I thought we had changed that. It may have been at a certain peak time that they enforced that, because the line is so long and it would take so long to do the 20 or more bills. But I can check on that and get back to you what the policy is.
Be great. And we had OIT in here, I think, a week or two ago, and I know your department allocated $6.6 million in postage for fiscal year 18. And we've talked about computerizing the real estate tax bills, water and sewer. And I'm wondering if there's anything else that from the revenue department and billing that we could computerize.
Well, I mean, in terms of one of the things that we really, that is in our plan and our major initiative in terms of computerization or technology is replacing our more than 30-year-old TIPS system, which is the accounting system. And the modern systems, I mean, there's a lot of limitations with an old mainframe system like that. Billing is one of them. It's a difficult process to change bills, to add text to bills. It's also difficult to build electronic interfaces so that customers, taxpayers can actually go in, see their account, cancel accounts, make changes to their accounts, make payments. So I think that would be the biggest thing that we could do. I think that would help our collections. It would reduce postage. It would make us more efficient. So I think that's the biggest.
I think it's a good idea. Where does that stand right now?
We're in the process of starting that. There's money, there's $20 million budgeted in the capital budget. We're in the process of bringing in experts to guide us through the RFP process.
So, I mean, one of the questions I wanted to ask, I'm not sure at your department or whose it is, but I'll ask the question anyway, is that I'm hoping that if we put in this new computerized system for real estate tax bills and water and sewer, that they'll also communicate with L&I, so we have like a platform where everybody can see all the information. So that, you know, one of the bills that we put through back in June was to make sure that people who owe the city money can't pull a building permit. So if we can have this computerized, it'll make it a lot easier across the board.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the things we've learned through implementation of the data warehouse is the more that systems can talk to each other and the more that departments can share information, the more efficient we can be. And I think that you know, we've done that to some degree. We've worked with L&I in the Eclipse system as they bring that on, and we would do that with OPA and, you know, as a new CAMA system comes on.
Well, I guess my question is, they told us at OIT when they were here, they're putting out a request for proposal. And my question is, are we looking at a system that will communicate with among the departments? If we're going to a new system, I would like to see us have one that everyone can communicate with and you have access to. So if L&I has, you know, they have to, someone pulls a permit, they can pull up the person's name, they can say, wait a second, they owe X amount in real estate taxes, water and sewer, and they have to be cleared up.
Yeah.
Do you know anything about that, or you're not involved?
I don't know. I mean, I know, I can speak kind of anecdotally from our department. I mean, one of the challenges that we've had is that as these new systems come on, there's still a challenge to integrate them into an old system like our TIP system. So that's one of the advantages of having a repository where at least all these systems can talk to the repository and then the departments can pull out of that repository. But really, I think it's more of an OIT issue.
Okay. The other, last year, I know we talked about, at the time you were here last year, BERT taxes delinquent were like 136 million. And I think they're lower today. Were they like 70 or 80 million roughly? And I know that you put out a request for information to try to find a vendor that we could possibly sell that delinquency and monetize it. And did we not have anyone respond to that?
We had one response. We met with that vendor. We have not, it was an RFI, so it was not an RFP. We were just looking to get information, learn a bit about this process. We had one response. We had meetings with that particular vendor. We did learn a little bit about the process. We've kind of backburnered it while other things were more pressing. But one of the things that we did learn through that process that there was not a lot of interest in that, and it seemed that the sale would be at a very, very deep discount. Yes.
Another question I have is, if somebody who owns multiple properties, is there any way to consolidate bills, especially when they go to the same payee? Because otherwise the city, somebody could own 25 properties and we send them 25 bills, 25 postage, but if we computerize that, that makes it easier. But is there any way to consolidate these multiple property owners?
Within our system right now, it's really difficult to do that. Under a new system, that would be something we'd look for, that capability to be built in. And also that's something that we would look for to be, we would look for that capability within an e-billing system as well. Because my hope would be that owners of multiple properties would want to opt in to an electronic billing system.
Yeah. The other comment I wanted to make on your performance measures, I'm very impressed. In fiscal year 16, I'm going to read from your performance measures. Under a category that's special to me, the earned income tax credit preparation, you had 17,000 returns, I guess, you helped prepare. And in fiscal year 18, or fiscal year 17, you'll be at 25,000, which is like almost a 50% increase.
Yes, I think the numbers in right now are over $20,000. 20,000 returns that were prepared for free. And, what's impressive there is, we've talked a lot about all the money that's left on the table, and we get that money back into people's hands. And the other side that we don't often talk about is the fact that it's free tax preparation. So it's saving, these taxpayers a lot of money in preparation fees as well.
Do we have any statistics for this past year as to how how much money we left on the table? Has that come out yet?
It actually takes a couple of years to get the data from the IRS about what was filed for and what we estimate the gap to be. So unfortunately, there is a lag. We did, however, just get the data for our first year. So this was the third tax season that we've had this. We were able to look at the number of folks claiming for our first year. And so it takes time, but we'll be able to have that. But the first year looks good. So we think as we've continued to ramp up both our support of free tax prep as well as our outreach, it's only going to get better.
But the statistic you do have is the number of returns that you helped complete. And that statistic from 16 to 17 was up 50%.
Yeah, we did increase our funding for that too.
Right.
So.
But would we also be able to find out from Campaign for Working Families, United Way, and all the other parties that are involved in this, if their return numbers increased, decreased, or stay the same? Because that would give you some indication as to how we're doing. Yeah, and so we get that information from the two partners we fund. So that's the Campaign for Working Families, what they do in Philadelphia, as well as the contracts with Pathways and their partner SEBA. An interesting thing for us will also be looking in the future about electronic returns. A lot of our outreach might drive people to go and do the myfreetaxes.com. So you won't see that in the statistic about the ones that we've supported for in-person prep. But it's also a great thing if somebody gets that information and is able to file on their own for free as well. Okay, thank you. Can I ask one more question while we're here? I want to make sure I understand your performance measures under the water. It says percent of water bills paid in 90 days. And the statistic is 87%. Do you know what the collection rate is on water and sewer?
Michelle Bethel, Deputy Revenue Commissioner. So our collection rate for current billings this year is 88%.
88%?
Yes, and for our first year, so those bills that are due and collected in the current year, we then typically pick up another 2 to 4% in years 2 and 3, which gets us to 90 to 94. And then for our 4 years to 15, we pick up another 1%. So that's a total collections of 95%.
And how much today, as we sit here, is due in water and sewer delinquency in total?
Today, March numbers, total on the books is $392 million.
392 million of water and sewer
Yes.
delinquent?
And that's
seems to
overall
be-
receivable. That's
Right.
that's
But
receivable.
that
That's
number
not the
seems to be
delinquent.
climbing.
For the overall receivable, yes, our numbers went up from the end of the 2016 from the CAFR that was reported, but our delinquency for that same period of time for 2015 is $255 million. That's the delinquency. So that's what we're actively
Are you saying that
working.
you're writing off debt that's greater than 10 years, is 255?
We're writing off debt that's greater than 1 year. We
If it-
charge that off of our financials.
Right, but water and sewer are a lienable
Correct,
item.
correct.
So if you don't write it off, if the total's 392?
Yes, that includes everything, yes.
And what do we bill in total in water and sewer?
Our billings for 2016, our total billings for 2016 was, our gross was 615, was gross billings for 2016, and our net
How much
billing,
was 2016 gross?
615, rounded up, 615
615 million?
million, yes. Gross, that was gross billings for 2016.
So to get to a delinquency of 392, that's a lot of years of delinquency. Because if your collection rates today are between 90 and 95%, 10% of 615 is just 61 million. You're at 392.
Well, just to clarify, the collection factor is based on our net billings and our current billings for that same period of time. So that's how we get to the 88%. So our net billings was 595. Our current collections off of the billings was 526. That's how we get to the 88%.
So if I'm correct, if I was looking at the total billing receivables of the city of Philadelphia, I have your monthly sheet, which is the total is 583 million as of March, but that's writing off about 180 to 200 million dollars of real estate taxes that are greater than 10 years. If we add that back in and we add in the water and sewer, we're between 1.150 billion and 1.2 billion in delinquent overall taxes. Not all collectible, but that's potential. Would you say that?
Added in water and real estate, you were
I
saying?
added water and sewer in, I added the old real estate taxes in, because they're collectible. It's between 1.150 billion and 1.2.
Total on the books, that your math sounds accurate.
Okay, so we have to work
Yeah.
on whittling that number down. Thank you very much. Thank you, Council President.
Yeah, Councilman, there was no limit, but there are other members now. Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilman Heenan.
Thank you, Council President. I'm just going to go off of the hearing for a moment for a point of personal privilege with your approval. You know, today, with your leadership, it's the 6th annual Veterans Affairs event across the street on the MSB Plaza, and we are joined here by 2 recipients that I was proud to honor that are in my district at today's event on your behalf. One is Robert Stevens, who retired after 38 years in a 913th Airlift Wing from the Air Force, and also Alexander Haranze, who is of the young age of 95 years old, who is one of the oldest survivors of Pearl Harbor. So I want to congratulate you both for your years of service. It's a pleasure and an honor, and thank you for joining us here today. Thank you for your service.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate your service. Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilwoman again.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about tax abatements and how they're looking. So I'm trying to get a little bit of grounding on the tax abatements right now and the amount of, I don't know if you've calculated the current value, were they all to be at value of the current crop of tax abatements that are out there? Do you have a number for that?
I do not have a number. We can get something to you.
And have you, could you help me understand what it would look like, for example, if there were modifications to the abatement program? So for example, could you project out what revenue might look like, for example, if the abatements were to sunset within 10 years as opposed to be like held for 10 years and then, you know, have the money come through? What would that look like? How would that impact revenue? What do you think would be the impact on that?
We could,
So we, about a year, 18 months ago, had an analysis done by a real estate analytics firm that was able to model out a variety of different scenarios, and we'll be able to share that.
Oh, great. Okay.
Yeah.
And did any of the scenarios also include a cap on the abatements?
I'm trying to, we'll take a look and see what they were. I forget, and when you say cap, we can talk to figure out exactly what that means, but we looked at, you know, if timelines were shortened or if the amount of abatement wasn't 100% in all
That's
cases. Right. And then it looked at the impact on revenues to both the city and school district with and without at those various things.
I mean, in part, like, for example, if abatement was capped at, say, 500,000 or, you know, even slightly higher for value of the property, what percentage of abatements would be excluded and or included within that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think we did have a definite analysis of the type of properties. One of the things that we learned from that was that basically every affordable housing development in the city has benefited from the tax abatement program. So it did break out by type of property, and I can go look and see if it also had the value of the property in addition to the type, but that'll provide some of that insight.
Okay, and when was that analysis done?
I believe it was about 18 months ago. 18 months? Yeah, it's about 18 months ago.
And was that done at the request of any particular entity?
I think I'm now going to look at my wristband, and it seems like it's time for Rob to answer.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. So there was a specific proposal from a council member about modifying abatements.
Yes.
And another council member asked that we analyze the impact of that abatement. So we used that to analyze kind of different scenarios with abatements.
And those were only just shared with the individual council members?
No, I think that was made public.
Was it?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, if you could send that over, that would be great.
Sure thing, we will.
All right, thank you very much, Council President.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Chair recognizes Councilman Dow.
Thank you, Council President. I just want to share with my colleague some statistics that I know you're going to love. In 2026, the city of Philadelphia, according to a recent report, is going to get $169 million of new taxes. 55% goes to the schools, Helen. By the way, of the statistics of the properties abated, this is factual information. Of our total abated properties, only 2.8% were over $1 million, which surprised me. I thought there'd be more. 2.8 over $1 million, 67% under 400,000, 25% workforce housing. And here's the more important statistic, why that abatement was so good. I think you were here when that happened, Council President?
Councilman, I was trying not to say anything, but if you keep talking, you're going to get me on a roll about that tax abatement. So go ahead. I'm telling you, you're great.
I have one more statistic, then I'll shut up.
Go ahead.
The housing starts in the suburbs since '99, 11%. In the city, 378%. So clearly, that was a great tool at that time. Thank you. Thank you, Council President.
Thank you, Councilman. I want to thank you very much for your testimony. I'll see you all at the the next hearing, the real hearing.
Will do.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Next up, we have the Board of Revision of Taxes. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Council President, members of Council. My name is Carla Pagan, Executive Director of the Board of Revision of Taxes, and I'm here this afternoon to testify on the fiscal FY18 operating budget. Just so you all know, the Board of Revision of Taxes General Fund appropriations from FY15 to FY18 has remained fairly consistent since the completion of AVI market value appeals. The FY18 proposed budget is $80,214 above the FY17 current projection. Since the 2014 citywide assessment, the volume of market value appeals has returned to normal levels. Approximately 4,500 appeals were filed for tax year 2017. For those appeals, non-oral appeal hearings began last fall, and the oral hearing schedule started this January. And by December 31st of this calendar year, we expect that all 2017 market value appeals will be complete or have decisions rendered. In addition, preparations for tax year 2018 are well underway. We are forecasting an increase of appeals due to the citywide reassessment of C&I or commercial industrial buildings. Normally, those types of appeals are 30% of the appeal volume, but for 2018, we're expecting approximately 70% of the appeal volume to come from commercial and industrial accounts. And typically, that C&I or commercial industrial hearing season is longer as those appeals require additional testimony and appraisal and other information to support reductions in market value. So that concludes the testimony today. I'm open to questions if there are any.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Just had a couple of questions. Just referencing your testimony, you're expecting closer to 70% of appeal volume as opposed to the usual 30%. And that's primarily due to the reassessment of commercial, industrial, mixed-use, and institutional buildings.
Correct.
How did you come to that figure of 70%?
It's really based on the last 20 years of history. So typically, of all the appeal volume, 70% comes from residential homeowners,
okay,
and 30% from commercial industrial. So we're expecting a flip, almost a reverse of that information, because the OPA has said that they've sent out, well, we know they sent out hearing notices or notices of changes to 100% of the commercial industrial market. So, and there are very few residential property owners that will get changes in their assessment.
Okay.
So that's what that's based on.
So in terms of the percentage of appeals lost or won, depending on what side of the equation you are, do you anticipate any difference, or do you think there will be less appeals because of the volume, or the same percentage, same ratio?
Well, we're hoping for we're anticipating the total appeal volume to increase by 50% next year. So, I mean, you can see from the numbers that we average between 4,000 and 5,000 appeals per year. So if we get under 10,000 for 2018, we'll be pleased.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, the reason I asked that because, Councilman Dom just referenced the new dollar figure in terms of revenue as a result of the commercial reassessment. A lot of people are excited about that, particularly the school district, and hopefully
Yes.
this will allow them to conclude that PFT contract like yesterday. And at the end of the day, there are some things that we like to do, and potential investments, maybe some tax restructuring. So we're concerned about the appeals process, why we're excited about the number, but we don't know how much that number will get pared down based on it going through the traditional process.
Yeah, so I think, I forget the percentage Rob was saying that the city allocates for, the revenue percentage the city allocates for appeal reductions.
So we're building in the potential loss of revenue based on appeals?
Yes, and I know that percentage has increased by a couple of percent for tax year 2018, just for the volume and the dollar volume of the amount being appealed versus the quantity.
We'll let Mr. DeBoe go on the record, might as well.
Yeah, we built in appeal losses.
Just state you.
Rob Dubow, Finance Director. We built in appeal losses of 20% in our projections, which is higher than they had been in the last couple of years.
Okay, so we're being real conservative in terms.
We hope so.
That's so. Yeah. All right. Thank you. Well, I'm saying conservative in the sense that we're going to lose more than we traditionally.
I knew you meant, yes.
Yeah. Thank you. We have in our 5-year plan, page 297, according 4,000 appeals were filed for tax year 2017. Can you tell me what the aggregate assessed value that were challenged as a result of that? It's a kind of tricky one.
I don't have value numbers. I have appeal quantity numbers, and typically the Office of Property Assessment runs numbers on that dollar figure, actually, and they go straight to finance. I don't know, you have that too, Rob? Oh, no, he's saying no.
Yeah. Mr. DeBoe, you've been here all day. I want you.
Yeah, the appeal databases don't keep as accurate assessment numbers if there are changes that happen in that tax year.
Been sitting a lot, so this walking back and forth has been good.
It's all good.
But I missed the question, sorry.
I was just asking the value, the aggregate value on it was 4,000 appeals.
Yeah. Right.
Oh, I don't have that with me, but we can get you that.
Just
Yes.
want to get it for the record, just get a number. Okay, well, I'm actually good. I'm going to recognize Councilwoman Gim.
Thank you very much, Council President. Good afternoon. How are you? I think about 2 years ago or last year, there was a lot of tension with the Bureau of Revision of Taxes over the pace of the appeals process, especially post-AVI. And it seemed to be something that was a real struggle. So I wanted to ask you, because the commercial reassessments are coming up, and they are important, as everybody has said, and whatever the outcome is whatever the outcome is. But I think the timing of it is also very important. And I'm wondering, one of the things that did come up last time was a lot of questions about the schedule for the BRT commissioners. Could you tell me whether you think that what the hearing schedule for the appeals is going to look like for this, and what kind of timeline you see for the conclusion?
So in an ideal world, we always hope to hear 100% of the appeals in that particular tax calendar year. So if 2018 appeal hearings begin January 1st of 2018, we prefer to be finished by December 31st of 2018. We are anticipating, however, probably taking on an additional hearing date. One of the things that the board offers a lot of times people want their day. They want their day to talk and kind of fuss about their assessments, and they want to be heard. So it's a balance, giving people an opportunity, a chance to vent their concerns and issues with their assessment, and also exhaust the cases as quickly and as efficiently as possible. So since commercial and industrial cases tend to be higher in market value, we schedule less of those at any given hearing date. So we'll probably take on either 1 or 2 more hearing dates in a week, or have multiple sessions in one day. Like, so during AVI, we had 1 day a week just dedicated for administrative appeals, and then we also had a morning and afternoon session 2 or 3 days a week to hear the number of appeals. So something like that might also have to happen for the commercial industrial cases. We'll really know come October 1 when the appeal deadline has come.
So, just could you clarify for me, how many
Sure.
days a week do you actually plan to have the hearings?
So right now, the board has hearings 2 or 3 days a week. Usually 2 days are dedicated to oral testimony hearings, and 1 day a week dedicated to those appeals where people don't want to put on an oral argument. The board will just meet to go over the factual information they sent.
And is that the fullness of their position? How much is a commissioner paid?
So the board members are paid $70,000 a year.
Right.
So that's not the fullness of their position. They do prep time. Some of those prefer to do prep time on Fridays before the start of the next week, or Monday before the start of their hearing week. So there is prep time that's in there also.
And is it that they don't do hearings 5 days a week?
We've actually never done hearings 5 days a week. There's always been at least 1 day allocated for board members to prep their appeal hearing schedule. So in the height of hearing actual value appeals, there was 1 day that was allocated for prep for them. And then they had hearings 3 days a week, and then non-oral hearings one day of that week.
Okay. So do you think it's possible to do 4 days a week of hearings? Part of it that's
Yes.
at play is, $120 million on the table in real estate revenue that, we're hoping is budgeted into the school district's budget and to the city's budget. One of the concerns that we had last time around on the AVI was because we failed to meet our needs around that it had a lot to do with, the district being off its mark in terms of its revenue projections. And so not only meeting the deadline, but potentially exceeding the deadline seems possible if hearings are currently only scheduled for 2 to 3 days a week and actually increasing to 4, or guaranteeing, working to 4 days a week seems like that would significantly guarantee us that we could meet our deadline.
So sure, that's something we can absolutely do. We have before. And to handle the office work when the volume's high, we usually have a pool of temporary staff that have come to work 3 months or 6 months or 9 months to get through the workload.
Well, I appreciate that. I would urge you to see what you can do about making 4 days a week. I think it's, something that the city of Philadelphia put a lot of effort in to make sure that the commissioners were paid an appropriate amount and were paid equally, I believe, across the board, so that no commissioner did not get paid unfairly or unequally during that time period. But in exchange, I think, in particular, 4 days a week of hearings to ensure that we meet our projections would be a huge benefit and would put a lot of confidence, I know, from myself on council and in our ability to ensure that revenue projections get met right on time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councilwoman. The chair recognizes Councilman Don.
Thank you, Council President, and good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I just want to make sure that I'm accurate with some of these numbers I'm going to share.
Sure.
Before this most recent commercial assessment, the value of real estate in the city was about $134 to $138 billion, roughly?
Yes.
Okay. And this most recent assessment that we claim is going to generate $118 million, if we use a loss factor of 20%, it looks like it's really $148 million against a value of $10.6 billion. So now our portfolio of the city is worth about $144 to $146 billion.
Okay.
And the revenue is 1.4, less nonprofits, et cetera, but our revenue is probably about 1.4 billion to 1.45 billion of revenue, of which the school district will get 55%. My reason for putting these statistics out there is because I'm concerned that we don't have enough assets and resources allocated to the Board of Revision of Taxes to fight these appeals and to defend them. And because I'm looking at your numbers, and if I'm reading it correctly, we just had $148 billion roughly raise in value, okay, or $14 billion raise in value, and I'm sorry, it's $10.6 billion raise in value, and we're allocating $80,000 more to defend those appeals in your budget. There is no way you can defend those appeals, and there's too much money at stake. So I'm just going to say this: if we have 148 potential $1 million, we're taking 20% off. This should be doubled or tripled, and we should go outside and hire the best attorneys and commercial appraisers to defend this. There's too much money at risk not to do this. Too much money. If you were in the private sector and you just generated, okay, $148 million of revenue, of which you were, assuming you're going to lose 20% or 30 million, you'd spend $1 million or $2 million to try to figure out how you keep it. We're spending 80,000. Are you concerned about that?
Well, one thing I will tell you, in this number, in that figure, is actually a RFP that was just recently awarded to a commercial appraiser that it's been hired to consult with the board. And I will tell you, if half of my board members are here, they'd be pleased to hear you say that, because they're fighting actually for a legal consultant to come on board as well.
You have to. I don't know I don't know how you're going to get the funding if we have to approve it, but
Yeah.
there's no way I'm going to tell you right now, I get emails from all kinds of law firms right now who want to take on the fight of filing appeals. We've created a tremendous business. And I'm not saying they're right or wrong. All I'm saying is I want to make sure the city defends their position fairly.
Yeah.
If we made a mistake, no problem. But I don't want us to, we had a property on Walnut Street, 1905, where we sold it as the city for 40 million, and it was assessed for 4.5. I mean, that's just not right. So I want to make sure that we don't lose this money, that 55% goes to the schools, and I want to make sure we defend it in a fair way. If we're appraising residential real estate in a fair way, commercial should be appraised in the exact same way. And I want to protect our interests, because I think there's a lot of money at risk here. And I'm going to tell you, there's a lot of people going to be filing appeals.
Yeah.
And if you have the best lawyers and the best commercial appraisers, that will speak volumes to getting this resolved.
Yeah.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
We need to do that. I'm just saying,
Yes.
that needs to be done.
One of the things that's happening in the next coming weeks, we will sit down with the Office of Property Assessment. We did want to get more in detail of all the commercial industrial notices that went out. How many properties exactly are there, and what is their current market value, just to kind of see the numbers that we're looking at, and if we did need to bring another commercial appraiser on staff.
Well, the way I'm looking at this, you raised commercial property values $10.6 billion. If I take the inverse of 1.4 times 148 million, that's the value of the real estate,
Okay.
10.6 billion. So to protect that, I'd say we have to have a bigger investment than what we're talking about here, which is 80,000.
Okay.
Anyway, thank you, Council President.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. You can tell when we're not raising taxes. Yeah. It's just a much more pleasurable. Thank you very much for your
Okay.
testimony.
Thank you.
Mr. Speaker. Next up, Rob DeBoe. You got anything?
Wait. No, I like it this way. Yeah.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Please proceed.
My name is Rob Dubo. I'm the Director of Finance. I'm here to testify in support of Bills 170-198, 199, and 200. I'm joined at the table by Anna Adams, Budget Director. The bills would reauthorize the current rates for the school property and use occupancy tax rates. 198 reduces the rates for wage tax from the current rates of 3.9004 for residents and 3.4741 for non-residents to 3.89 and 3.46 respectively. Administration remains committed to a gradual reduction in the wage tax, as numerous studies and reports have consistently cited cities' relatively high wage tax rates as a barrier to job creation. Over the course of our proposed 5-year plan, the wage tax rates would be reduced to 3.7% for residents and below 3.3% for non-residents, which are the lowest the rates have been in decades. That concludes my testimony. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
That's what I'm talking about. Good. Question. UNO, tax collection process or assessment. So how do we send out tax bills for UNO?
I'm going to ask the Revenue Commissioner to answer
All
that.
right, I figured you pretty much
It
know
took all of one question
happens,
for me to
Rob.
call
You've
him
been around so
up.
long, I know you know pretty much everything, so we tend to ask you questions that
If
you may
he
not
wasn't
want.
here, I would have tried, but
Yeah, I understand, Rob.
So for the UNO tax, Frank Breslin, Revenue Commissioner, for the UNO tax, we send out monthly it's really a tax form. It lists the total amount of tax due based on the assessed value for the property.
Of the total property.
For the total property. And then
Okay.
there's lines to take the exemptions or exclusions, the residential portion, those type of things, and then reduces it to the amount of tax due, and then that gets submitted with payment.
Is that self-reporting?
It's self-reporting, yes.
So if we were to just basically send out a tax bill based on the assessment, what the initial form that we sent out, is it in an assessed value and attached bill? Or is it just a form that says?
We call it max tax, so it starts with an amount of tax due, and then you get
So
to.
it's for the entire property?
For the entire
And then
property,
they-
and then you get to reduce it from there.
So they get to determine and how do we follow up on that?
We do it through our compliance unit through audit. So when auditors are out, they'll actually, or our investigators, when we're out, I talked a little bit earlier about investigators being out, and Councilman O also talked about, what they need to see. Sometimes they need to see a residence or inspect a property to determine what portion is being used for commercial, what portion is being used residential, because sometimes there's areas that are being used for storage. So you could have a back room that's being used for storage, and we have to determine that when that form was filled out, they didn't classify that portion as residential. So we're really looking at it in terms of a percentage. We start with 100%, the assumption that 100% of the property is commercial, and give them the amount of tax that's due, and they have the opportunity to reduce that.
All right.
And then our auditors will verify that those reductions are accurate.
So how many properties, how many accounts do we have?
I don't know the number of UNO accounts, but I can get that to you.
Thereabout, I'm just
Yeah.
saying. I'm trying to find out, essentially, you have investigators or auditors, whatever we use to confirm the information, the self-reporting information. And I'm trying to see if there's like 10,000 accounts for commercial properties, how many people do we have?
Yeah, so so based on the example I gave, we need to reduce it down because there's a lot of properties that are remitting, I don't know the percentages, but there's percentages that are remitting at 100%. So we don't need really any compliance enforcement there. And one of the other things we do is
So full occupancy.
they're paying full
No problem.
occupancy,
All So
What
the
we-
question is, how many properties do we believe, or do you, if you don't have the number on?
I don't have it, but I can get you that
You find how
number.
many of those properties have mixed use, i.e., some residential or some exempt or some other type of
I can get you
activity?
those. We'll get you those.
I'm just trying to get a sense of if people are actually paying taxes for the taxable property in these mixed-use properties.
Yep.
How difficult would that be to get?
We can get that for you.
Like quickly?
Yeah,
All right, before we vote on the budget?
yes.
Okay.
No, I think we have that information. I just,
All right.
it may even be in this big binder of
Yeah.
stuff, but I'll never
'Cause I'm
find
just
it
trying to
right
see,
now. So
do we have enough
yeah,
people?
we'll get our
to act-
hands on it.
Do we have enough people to actually go out and determine if the self-reporting information is accurate? I mean, if,
Yes.
you know,
Yeah.
it has to be a lot of properties, and I'm sure we don't have close to that amount of people.
Yeah, one of the other things we're looking at is, and I get a status, I don't think we've actually started the process, but we're using screening tools to identify properties that there's indications that they should be audited. So it's kind of what we do with our traditional audits. We have a screener, an audit screener in the process, and we use computers, technology to assist us with this, and it looks for certain traits, attributes that indicate that a property should be reviewed, and that helps us focus our resources so that we're not looking at that big pie and wasting resources looking at properties where there's probably a very small portion of it being excluded. And with the new exemption on UNO, that's eliminated a lot of properties out of the pool. So we're doing a lot, and I can get that number to you as well, what the number was pre-exemption and what it is now. So that, without adding additional resources, we have a smaller pool to look at, so that makes us more
Okay.
effective too.
I guess this, Mr. DeVoe, this might be, so what level of flexibility do we have with UNO in terms of non-uniformity, I guess I would say?
I think we have the same constraints there we have with any of our other taxes.
You believe so?
Yes. Because the uniformity is for taxes in general. It's not just for property tax, let's say.
Okay. All right. Okay, thank you. Chair recognizes Councilman Don.
Thank you, Council President. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
First, I want to just thank both of you for all your cooperation and help this past year. Thank you.
Thank you. It's like we've been making a musical together.
You guys are doing a good job. You're very cooperative, so I appreciate that. I don't have much, but I have one I want to follow up from the conversation we just had. I am concerned that we don't have enough resources in BRT, in defending these tax appeals. And I know that we've talked about this. I just want to make sure that if there's a way to get money to them.
I want to clarify one thing too. So defending the appeals would be OPA.
Okay.
BRT just hears the appeals.
Oh, hearing.
So they don't defend them, they just hear them. It's OPA, and we put additional resources.
How much additional did we put into OPA?
We put money both for new assessors and for the outside consultant, but I'll get you the numbers in a second.
So it's Anna Adams, Budget Director. We put 500,000 in for a commercial reassessment consultant, as well as kind of to fully fund all their staff, an additional 736,000.
You might need more considering the amount at risk. Because in your numbers, I think it's what, 148 million, 20% loss factor is 30 million.
We did it off the taxable base. We didn't do it off the total base, but yeah, get to the same point, I think.
So I'm in favor, if you need more, to come back and apply more, because there's a lot at risk, and 55 cents of every dollar is going to the schools.
Understood.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Council President.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilwoman McGinn.
Yes, thank you very much, Council President. Just wanted to check really quickly, I know the school district sees a 10% increase in UNO. Do you know where that's coming from? I'm going to ask them when they come in, but I'm curious about whether there's no rate changes or anything.
There's no rate change
Okay.
in the UNO for FY18.
Okay, so they just see a 10%
They see it,
reduction, which
right.
is, and then, let's see, the one thing to piggyback off the previous conversation a little bit, how long did it actually take to resolve through the AVI appeals once they were impacted? Once they went into effect, what was the actual process for the AVI appeals, and what was the length of time?
Yeah, so there are two parts to the process. There's the first level review that goes to OPA, so they'll try to resolve things in-house. And then there's the appeals to the BRT. Appeals to BRT, I think, have to be in place by October of that year. The first year there were a massive number of appeals, and I think it actually took them a couple of years to work all the way through those. There are still maybe a handful actually left from the original appeals.
Even today?
Yeah, but I think it's maybe a couple of dozen out of 20,000, and I think it may be particular issues with those.
Okay.
I think they're now back to a point where they're caught up and they get to the appeals within the year, the time frame that Carla was talking about.
And so how many years did it take to work through 20,000
I think
roughly?
I think to get through almost all of them, it took maybe 2 years, and then there's some kind of stragglers that are still out there.
And city revenue had counted on them being completed within the year?
We assumed some appeal loss.
Yeah, right, of course.
Right. But initially, I think we thought that it would take about a year. And then as we saw how the process was going, we pushed it back a little on our estimates.
So how many commercial properties are we, so in the current batch of reassessment properties, do we have a figure on the number of appeals? Have they started to come in yet?
No, the appeals
But if
won't
we were
come
to
in.
use the 20%.
So we had 40,000 properties.
Okay.
Who were affected, commercial properties, commercial, industrial. To put that in context, the AVI was all 540,000 properties, and we had 20,000 appeals there.
But commercials usually reappeal at a higher rate than residential.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
They have lawyers.
Yes. And now we do too. Well, we always did, but now we have outside lawyers
And is
also.
this the largest batch of commercial reappraisals that's been done?
Since AVI, yes.
Since
AVI
AVI,
included
okay.
all of the commercial. So
Okay.
that 20,000 appeals included all commercial and residential.
Okay. And what percentage of the 20,000 would you say were commercial?
Just 40, the 20,000?
No, of the 20,000 back.
I'd have to get
yeah.
back to, we can
Well,
get you
in
that.
part, I'm wondering what we can project at and what is reasonable to expect out of what will go before the BRT, for example.
Right.
And I don't know that we can definitively do that. But my guess is that if it's a quarter, it's a sizable chunk. And so in part, we do need the BRT to be putting in a full schedule.
Yeah, agreed.
Right, more than what they currently have scheduled. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you.
You guys want to be around for public testimony tonight? No?
We'll watch back from our offices.
All right. Thank you very much. Committee will stand in recess until 5 p.m. today for public testimony.
It's a little different tax hearing from last year's.